Hello and welcome to the penultimate episode of the 2023 Rugby World Cup preview series. It's hard to believe, but we are almost there. The World Cup starts this week, and to round things off, we're going to be looking at the world number one, the boys in green of Ireland. Ireland have never made it past the quarterfinals. We don't need to be reminded of that, but this impressive game plan and even better form line. Can we dare to dream just yet, or is it too soon? Is even that putting the mockers on us? I don't know. Joining me to look ahead to Ireland's tournament are two provincial podcast hosts, both of whom making their second appearance. So welcome on firstly to host of the Harper Rugby Pod, Jeff Pagano. Welcome, Jeff.
Hello, Kyle. Thanks for having me on.
Always great to have you. And making his return is a man of the returning Second Row podcast, Mr. Pádraig Kelly. Welcome back, Pádraig.
Thank you very much, Kyle. Great to be on again.
It's always good to have you, of course, lads. And this is episode number, what was it? 12, I think it is. And every single one has been started the same way. The excitement level. So this is going out. We're recording this 7 days from away from opening night. So Jeff, where's your excitement levels right now?
Well, yeah, first, like I said, Kyle, thanks for having me on. And hello again to Pádraig. Yeah, the thing about the buzz, is that like over the past few months, there's been so much to distract us rugby nerds. There was the World Under-20s, that way too drawn out Johnny Sexton situation, the World Cup warm-ups, the Summer Nation Series, and the Rugby Championships, which brought their own endless talking points, like Owen Farrell and his attempted tackles, Eddie Jones and his eventful pressers, and the Springboks and their creative benches. But for myself as an Irish fan, it didn't really sink in that the World Cup was upon us until the actual squad was announced last weekend. And we saw that those pictures online of them all actually getting on the plane and going to France, or should I say going back to France, where they'd already been last Saturday. But I have to be honest, not only did all of that 24-hour news cycle fodder distract me from the actual kickoff of the tournament itself, just to step outside the Irish bubble for a minute, it meant I actually had to be reminded that the very first match is actually France against the All Blacks. I mean, if you had to hand pick a pairing to kick off a tournament that brings together the two hemispheres, I'm sure even Irish fans would be hard pressed to argue that this is the one. So yeah, from now until things get underway at the Stade de France on September 8th, I'd say the buzz all over the rugby sphere is just going to be growing even more with each passing day.
Absolutely. And Pádraig, yourself, for you, is it that opening night game that has you on tender hooks, or is it Ireland against Romania or other games?
I'm just giddy for it to all get started because we've talked about the draw, like everyone's talked about the draw and the ridiculous nature of the how lopsided it can be. But think about how actually there's so many pools of death now. Like we're in a pool of death, Wales are in a pool of death. England could end up being in a pool of death given their form. It's just incredible. It's going to be one of the most open group stages of a Rugby World Cup I think we're ever going to see. And it's incredible. I cannot wait for it to start. I can't wait to watch every single bit of rugby I can. I love watching the tier two developing nations because you don't really get to see them as readily, as easily as we will now. And that's what I'm looking forward to, seeing what they can do, seeing the Chilis, the Romanias, the Uruguays. And that's what the World Cup is about, giving them their spotlight because they don't get that the rest of the time. And if World Rugby get their way, they won't get it the rest of the time. So it's great to have them on this platform. I can't wait to see every second of rugby I can.
Yeah, it promises to be a cracker. We know that, and I suppose like Ireland's head coach Andy Farrell, you could say he's a tier two nation boy. You know the way England are going, but we'll leave it at that. We'll leave it at that. But he is one of the storylines because everywhere you look, there's a question about coaching, be it a positive one like Farrell or Galtier, or kind of a reductive one like say an Ian Foster, a Steve Borthwick, and conversations like that. And I suppose firstly, Park, I just want to look at Farrell's 4 years as a whole. It's been a winding road, but apart from the slow start, it has just felt like it's just gone up and up in the last 2 years.
It really is mad to actually think back to 4 years ago and just to listening, to remembering all those interviews post match going, it's coming. It's coming. We're going to get there. This performance is there. And you're like, really? Because it didn't look it at the time. Like, I think everyone who's honest can see there was a shape there, but nothing was actually really working. And then to see that kind of click over the space of 18 months, it's incredible. And you can actually see now the journey that they went on, and you can see the blueprint that was there 4 years ago coming to fruition. But what's really impressive about the style of play and how the team are doing, it's not their final form. This is just another step. It's just another phase. You think also that Farrell has his guys as well that he's based his success around, and he's brought players through. He's tested guys. He's given guys caps, but he has his guys, and I think his success has come from going, I believe in you. You're bringing something to my squad, and I think that's set him up like that, and like not finishing less than third in the Six Nations, which is the bare minimum requirement. I know, but even through the not so good seasons, he was still getting the results that don't disappoint an Irish fan. If you think about it, like, we're not happy, but we're not sad at the other end either. It's that kind of like, well, this is he's got the bare minimum done. We can only go up from here.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we'll talk about, like, and did mention there, it was a slow start, Jeff, and we were questioning how Ireland played. It looked a bit blunt at times, especially attack. You think back to, I think it was 2021 Six Nations in particular, before the England game, where it all started to click. It looked blunt, but now this team, the style of rugby, you look at lads like Matt Hansen and James Lowe, the untidy wingers with the smile on their face, they epitomise what Ireland are about. And there's probably a genuine question to be asked. Results aside, yeah, they've won a Grand Slam, and that's the pinnacle of any Irish team has ever got to. But aside from that, this is probably one of the best versions of an Irish team that we've ever seen in terms of the product of what's on the field.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if you point to that series in New Zealand, I'm just going to sort of piggyback on what Pádraig was saying, because at the risk of my words matching my accent when it comes to having me sound anything like Ted Lasso, the key component to this Andy Farrell squad has been belief. I mean, like Pádraig said, he lets them know that he believes in them, and this is a quality that showed before that New Zealand tour. Although I reckon it was then that's where we all got to see it, because it wasn't just that we won that series on their soil. We won it after being beaten 42-19 in that first test. I mean, Irish sides in the past would have crumbled after starting a series like that. But remember, we scored first in that opening test in Eden Park, courtesy of the man, I seem to recall. Just despite being well beaten, we were to get right back to that plan for the rest of the series. And actually, in all three matches, we scored within the first 5 minutes. And if that doesn't show belief, then nothing does. I mean, who knows? Maybe Andy really does have a belief sign pinned to the dressing room wall. But what I do know is that while there have been a few bumps along the road, like the little scare we had against Samoa, I'd say the same could be said for any team in any code on a long winning streak. It's like again, like Pádraig said, it's not so much the tactics have been sound. He's been selecting the team to fit the tactics, but overall, this is a team that's we always say, getting past the quarterfinals. This isn't a team that's interested in getting past the quarterfinals. If they're in a tournament, they're there to win it. And that attitude that comes from them. So I guess to summarize, the biggest importance we can put in that series in New Zealand is that it showed us as fans to have as much belief in what this group is doing as they have themselves. I mean, since they went on to even further success since that tour, I see no reason to doubt they can go on to even more.
Absolutely. And it is that kind of, again, to use the word belief, and just courage in what they're doing as well, because it takes a lot of courage to actually play this on-ball brand of rugby, this to high ball and play time. Like Ireland are running teams into the ground in terms of how intense they are, not necessarily with size, but with speed. And I suppose, Pádraig, to kind of come back to you, like Jeff mentions the test win down in New Zealand, they followed that up by beating South Africa at home, and then they went on and won a Grand Slam. This year, like when it comes to scaling the mountain and that belief, like what could hold them back? Like they have done everything. They are a very confident team. Like I don't want to say, here's reason X and Y that Ireland will lose, because that's not what we're we're going to aim for. But like, would you hold the belief that there's just more to come from this side?
I do think there's more to come for them, especially going forward. I think how we play lends itself to there being a lot more options in what we're doing. I think taking that attacking burden off Sexton, Burner, Crowley, letting Hansen, Lowe, Ringrose come in at first receiver just helps that helps cause defenses to think that bit more. We're good. There'll be times we'll struggle defensively, but I think that's why we want to play on ball. Like we're a bit more an on ball team now. We want to run teams ragged, like you're saying. We want to run teams through, and I think the big thing that this team will focus on is how they've got here. Their goal is to win the World Cup. And I think they seem to be a long-term focus. They only have two types of focus, long-term and short-term. So right now they want to win the World Cup. Come training on Tuesday, they want to beat Romania. And that's the focus. And then when that's done, they'll want to beat Tonga. You know, it's short-term focus for long-term gains. I think that's where this team's strength comes from, because they get it from energy, they get it from people in camp, and you see with some of the selections. I know people question some of those selections, but you can see that's why like a Kilcoyne is there, why an Earls is there. It's personality based as much as skill based, and if you're a 50-50 call, you want to be the best person to be in camp if you're the same ability as someone else.
Oh, and it's a very fair point. We'll get into the squad as well, because, you know, as you said, personality is important. There are big personalities in that dressing room. Again, someone who stands out to me is Mac Hansen. You know, he goes in there, no one knows how he's training. There was a lot of, dare I say, waffle being talked about in the media of, oh, he can't defend. It's like, find me one example that says he can't defend. And he just went in there. Andy Farrell liked him straight away. He got man of the match in his debut, and he has never looked back. And this is what you want in a squad. And like the 33-man panel, everyone has seen it now at this point. We're 8 days from, you know, at the earliest from when you listen to when it was named. No Keane Healy, no Keane Prendergast. That's really all that we can say in terms of talking points. One of those was injuries, one of those was the split. It's insanely cohesive. Like, it's like, I know it's a bit of a running gag for some, and this is essentially Ireland Rugby Club. This is essentially a club side, because everyone knows what they're doing. They might as well be together, you know, 365 days a year. So with that in mind, Pádraig, obviously you said there was no real surprises. What do you make of this squad? And I suppose depth is kind of an almost sometimes overused talking point, because realistically, if your third choice in every position is playing, you're not going to win anyway. But it is a deep squad. It is a confident squad. So are you happy with the selection?
I really am. Like, there's no real, like I said, there's no real surprises. It's a good squad. It's won matches. You know what I mean? I think some people need to remember, this might not be the best group of 33 players, but this is the best group of 33 that play Andy Farrell's game. And they're two very different things. Andy Farrell has a way he wants to play rugby, and if you don't fit that, you're not going to the World Cup. I think that's why Stockdale's not there, because he's a good, hard-running finisher of a winger, but he doesn't have the ability to step in as first receiver as fluidly as, say, Jimmy O'Brien, who'll end up on the wing, like, or Keith Earls, who can play 13 and wing and at a push fullback. And there's the difference between a lot of the kind of the fringe calls. It's what else are you bringing, and how well do you slot into my game plan? Like, I was gutted for Prendergast, and I say he's number 34 on that team list of, and it was, if there was an extra forward, he's there. But the squad, I think you got to be happy with it. It's a squad that's won things. You know, how can you not be happy with a squad that's winning? And yeah, that's kind of it. It's like it's such a boring squad to talk about, to be honest. Because what can you say? It's been there, done that. It's got trophies. It's got one more to win.
Yeah, well, I feel a bit seen there, because I managed to get an hour talking about the squad on Sunday, and that wasn't even emotions, because I knew what was coming. It was literally down to McCluskey or Prendergast. That was the only talking point. And I suppose we wouldn't be doing our jobs here if we just came out and said this squad is brilliant, this squad is excellent. This if France had these 33 players, they'd select them. Like that's not the case. But there are positions, some of which of weakness. And I know on your page on YouTube, you've gone through, different position groups that some are weaker, some are stronger, some have better depth than others, some have unknown depth, like open side. So with that in mind, is there any positions that stand out to you as weaker? I don't want to say weak, but weaker than the rest.
Yeah, I mean, like much has been said about the squad. Like we say, it was more or less set in stone long before it was announced. And I mean, given the way they played, I can't really find a whole lot wrong with what we consider our best 15. Now, that's not to say they're guaranteed to win everything. I'm just saying it's more than good enough to be at least a match for any other team. I suppose where we're likely to be tested. I mean, you can turn that. You can turn that versatility thing maybe the other way and say that because we've gone for more versatility and on the fringes of the squad rather than specialty, it could if we lose a couple of players maybe in key positions, like maybe someone like a Josh van der Fleer as a natural 7 or Hugo Keenan as a fullback, we could be tested with the people backing them up. And obviously Cian Healy's loss was a huge blow. He was always going to be the principal backup to Andrew Porter. But even then, I just want to be clear. While I'm saying our reserve options might be a weakness, we've seen time and time again over the past couple of years how others can do excellent work. Just look how Finlay Bealham and Tom O'Toole doing so well at tight head. Look at Stu McCluskey playing his way back into serious contention. So I'm not saying it's out of the question for the Jeremy Lockmans of this world to step up if required. I mean, we'll just have to see. Can I just say one more thing on a weakness? Yeah. This isn't really on the squad on particular selections, but it's just something I wanted to say. It's on the whole area of discipline. This is going to apply to all 20 nations. And obviously, the main talking point we're talking about discipline at the moment is high tackles and red, yellow cards and going to the bunker and all that. But I'm talking as well about discipline in every aspect of the game. I just want to get this off my chest. For Ireland in particular, I have this recurring nightmare where we're 4 points behind in a knockout game in France with the clock ticking down. We win a penalty to give us a 5-meter line out, only to get done for blocking as we set up the maul. I mean, I'm running on the assumption that if I say it on enough pods, it won't happen. But seriously, it's something that could really hurt us if we're not careful. But no, back to the squad. It's like, you're afraid to say that it's perfect, but I think Pádraig got it right. It's like you're talking about these squads. It's not just about the individual players. It's how they work together for the coach and the way he wants to play. And there's really no, there'll be many that'll be disappointed, that'll be on the fringes outside the squad that didn't quite make it, but it's definitely a good 33 for Ireland.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is, elements to it that people will say are weaker. And I suppose I might just jump in there, and I mentioned this in my own, but like say a Jeremy Lockman, who some people point to, well, Jeremy Lockman held out and locked out Munster's scrum against France Malherbe, one of the best tight heads in the world in the URC final. You look at, say, a Joe McCarthy. Joe McCarthy looks like 5 times the player in green than he was in blue because he was a penalty machine in blue. And that's not disrespecting him. He's probably just trying to get up the pecking order, whereas with Ireland, he might have just been told, just keep it easy. You don't know what the coaching messages are. You look and say, well, Peter O'Mahony's our backup 7. Do we have a lack of 7? Well, Peter O'Mahony can do a job at 7. He can. We know he can. You look at maybe, say, Jack Crowley. Oh, if he has to go to 12. Well, if he has to go to 12, he has to. Like at the end of the day, and I've said this for a long, long time. If Ireland get to a situation where they're without 5 or 6 starters again in the World Cup quarterfinal, we don't deserve to be in the semi-final, because find me one World Cup winner, with the exception of the New Zealand out half situation in 2011, where they had to go down and down the pecking order. It just doesn't happen. You can't win World Cups with lads who've played, 7 URC games and have to be drafted in, or the old Belvedere under 12s as Andy Farrell quit before. It just does not happen. I suppose it's a good starting point to start from. Well, is our 23 strong? Yes. Are they trusted and proven? Yes. Some even outside of that, like O'Toole, as you mentioned, like McCluskey, like say a Keith Earls or Jimmy O'Brien, who are unlikely to feature in the matchday 23. And that's what you need. You don't need to have 50 ready to go starters. You just need to have 23 and a slice of luck as well. South Africa had it in 2019. New Zealand were by far the best team in 2015. I'll give them that. But typically, you need to stay injury free. And I suppose, Part, before we move on to the pool, I might just ask you, like, how important do you think Ireland's injury record is going to be? Because touch wood, and don't want to be putting the mockers on or anything, they have been fairly decent in terms of injuries in the past 2 years. It's just been Sexton for a game, Henshaw or Ringrose for a game, say a Matt Hansen or a James Lowe for a game or two. It has been fairly decent, but would you say that's nearly more important than, as I was saying, well, we need a Joe McCarthy to be James Ryan, which we don't?
I think every team is gonna need to be healthy. Like, look at France. They've lost so many influential players before the tournaments even began.
4 starters already.
Yeah, like, and the thing is, France have a system where they make use of that incredible depth they have, unlike England, who aren't making use of the incredible playing pool they have. Sorry, not depth. But Ireland need to go through this World Cup injury free, or as near to injury free as possible. We saw what happened before when 5 players get injured for a big game. We've been there. We've seen the results. You can't take out 5 starters with injury, especially late to the day. It does depend how these injuries come. If someone gets injured week 1 and someone gets injured week 2 and it drips through like that, that's okay, because you're rotating people in and the flow isn't broken. But if we have a situation where we're like suddenly snap down 5, that's going to be the problem. I don't think injuries per se will cause us too much bother. It's just how they come and how long they last. The guys are there to step in. I think we have the depth in the first 30 really that can make the difference. If we're then going into the reserves coming up and having to come in, not that they won't do a job, that's where you're going to lose the cohesion that's been built in camp now. And that's where the damage is done, especially because if an injury happens on a Saturday, you can't bring in the replacement till a Monday or Tuesday from memory. I can't remember. I can't remember the exact time. So suddenly you're kind of going rest day, review day, and then the new guys in who wasn't there for the review day. So they might get sent the notes, but they're not interacting. They're not in there. They haven't been there for the previous 2 weeks in those warm-ups. I think it was one of not the silly things, but I think it's one of the, maybe we're going to look back hindsight. I'll say it now. If we're looking back at hindsight 2020, players had to come in and they weren't up to speed. I think naming drip fit cutting players in groups up until that final squad announcement might be an issue, but that would be hindsight 2020. They should be there till day 1 running opposition and being there for those team meetings. I understand trying to get the energy of a group right before a World Cup, but that will be complete hindsight 2020 if that comes to fruition. There's not much more you can do. They've been talking about their training, how happier they are. It's more rugby focused. We're seeing less soft tissue injuries now than we were before. In the Six Nations, everyone was getting knocks. I think we were doing that heavy lifting for this tournament 6 months ago in that fitness terms. So they're not rebuilding up a lot of fitness that, say, the likes of England are doing or the likes of France get to do now. It's the only time they actually get to do it is to get that time that Ireland take for granted. Like Ireland have, Andy Farrell gets his squad whenever he wants them. France only get them a week around a game and the 2 weeks for a tournament. So everything that we think is an Irish bonus and Irish strength, everyone else has now. So I think by using previous tournaments like the Six Nations to build up the fitness and build up the strength so we can concentrate on rugby going into this one, we're in a lot better state for those soft tissue injuries going forward.
And it's probably important to note that, you look at 2019, Ireland really, they really went for it in terms of, SNC prep, and they burnt out. They simply burnt out when they went to Twickenham. They did the same thing in 2007. But this Irish side, if you want to take Munster and Leinster as the last 2 teams to finish, they were only looking at about 2 to 3 weeks off. I think Munster players had 2 weeks off Then they had a week of training with Ireland. Leinster would have had 3. Connacht would have had 4. It's not a lot of time to have off before you're going back in. And then they had maybe 2 weeks on, 1 week off. So you're not going to be losing a whole lot of fitness. It's essentially the same amount of time out as a small injury. That's really all it was. And they are kind of in that flow now. Yes, there are a few injuries, and we do pray that Dan Sheehan comes good, Ronan Kelleher, and Jack Conan. But I suppose we'll cross that bridge when it comes to them. Realistically, we shouldn't need those guys until we play South Africa. Realistically. And we don't know what stage South Africa will be by the time they get to that game. They could have already lost the game by the time that comes around. And I suppose, Pádraig, we'll get into that Pool B, pool of death. Well, there's possibly 3 of them at the moment. How do you see it unfolding? Who do you have getting out of the pool? I know I'm probably jumping the gun because I want to come back to the earlier games, but who do you have getting out of the pool?
I'll start at the end. I think Ireland, South Africa, they make it out of the pool. And to be honest, I think that's just going to be the way it's going to end up. And I think Scotland are going to scare both ourselves and South Africa. I think anyone who thinks they're not going to scare us hasn't been watching them play. I think what's going to be good for us is that we start fast and they start slow. If you look back at the Georgia game for Scotland there last weekend, like they're 6-0 down at halftime, but come the second half, they got going again and they put on cricket like 30 points. They're starting slow. They're a team that starts slow at the moment. I think that will hold them back going into this tournament. I think Ireland are going to have a really nice mixed team versus Romania. Johnny Sexton to start because he'll need the leg game in the legs. We're going to mix again for game 2, and then we're going to go full out against South Africa, because what I think a lot of commentators are forgetting is we have 13 days to rest after that game. We don't have to make a call on injury for 7 days, if you think really. So we have to go all out for South Africa. We have to go all out for Scotland. It's just how it's set up for us. I think the order of games is going to help us, 1, stay healthier, and 2, get the best out of the performances so we can continuously improve as the tournament goes on. So yeah, I think it definitely suits Ireland, this draw. It's a terrible pool, but the draw, the sequence of games definitely helps us. And, as this team, I think is actually sponsored by adversity, not belief. It's this pool and side of the draw is adversity squared. And I think Andy Farrell's there just going around skipping in glee that he can just say the word every couple of seconds. It's definitely Ireland's pool to lose given the draw.
Interesting. I understand that, but then I suppose, we looked into South Africa's as well. They start with a tough game. Well, they had the Rugby Championship. Then they have Romania, I think, after Scotland, and then they have us. So it's essentially a week off before they play us, and then they have 2 weeks to prepare for a quarterfinal, especially if they win those 2 games. So there's that too. But I do take your point, and I hope we're not, coming back to this and saying, well, the adversity got to us or whatever, tongue in cheek in 5 weeks' time. But Jeff, over to you now. Who do you have coming out of the pool, and what way do you see it unfolding?
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same as Pádraig there. I mean, it's, again, I'd hate to go back to belief again, but we have to, if we're going to have serious designs of going deep into this tournament, we've got to assume that the matches against Romania and Tonga are ones we can win with rotated squads. So I spoke earlier about, we're going to need alternatives at positions like 1, 7, 15. I reckon this will be a good time to get those bedded in and allow us to protect the key players. And also, as Pádraig said, we can't ignore the need to get some game time into Sexton's boots before we play South Africa. So I agree. I wouldn't be too surprised to see him start against Romania. So he can, it helps as well. He's captain for our first match of the campaign as well. So, but the way they do pan out, it means we can build our way to the Springboks, give that match everything, and then, take the bye week to regroup and see how the squad is looking before facing the Scots in Paris. I really think, and I think this is what Andy Farrell does with his team anyway. We can talk about how the other teams are set up and what what it's like in their camps, but I think they're kind of focused on what they're doing and what they need to do for their matches, and let the others sort themselves.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I might just come to you on the rotation point there, Pádraig, as well, because there has been a lot of debate. Some reckon Ireland will go full strength against Romania, give the first team a proper hit out together as combinations, and then maybe rotate for Tonga or so on. But if you were in Andy Farrell's shoes, how would you, shake things up over the first two games? And reports are leading us to believe that the vast majority, if not all, the 33 will play those two games. So what way would you go?
I think you have to mix and match. I think you go roughly about half your starting pack in inverted commas. So I'd start, say, for the first game, I go Furlong, Porter, Herring, for example. I'd put McCarthy at 5 and Ryan at 4 for that game, or put in Henderson there, and then do Baird, one off Conan. I play Conan if he's fit just to get that game. I think that's going to be an easier game for someone coming back from injury. And I play Van der Fleer. I would give Gibson Park and Sexton run out together. And I think McCluskey starts with possibly Henshaw 13, with Hansen, O'Brien, and Earls. That would be if that is a starting 15, I'm going to give the lottery numbers at the start doing the lottery. But no, you got to mix and match. There's no point having guys cold going into South Africa, full stop. I think you either go 40-60, as in 40% starters, 60% fringe players, then you go to 60%, 40%, and then you go full hog against South Africa. Something like that, I think, will work and will give the best kind of bang for the buck for game time into players.
So essentially you're going minutes over over combinations.
Yeah, like depends on the combination, like who are you worried about going into this? If you're worried about Lochman for South Africa, then you play him with the person you need to play him with for the first game, and you put him as sub for the second game with that person. I think that's how you do it, but you do them together. You keep those little segments together, but you do it in a way where you're kind of going, right, 60% of my team is going to be starters, 40% isn't for Tonga, 40% is going to be starters for Romania, 6% isn't. So that way you're building the team up to South Africa without killing them for minutes or overplaying them or mixing the combinations too much.
No, that's
we also can't rule out the option of going with 8 forwards on the bench against Romania and 8 backs on the bench against Tonga.
I think we can rule it out now.
Well, it could be an option. It could be an option.
I don't think it is.
You have to have props on the bench.
Yeah, well, like
I know Earls will do a job, but still.
That's what I'm saying.
I could see McCluskey as a good hooker if we had 2 6'4" props, but I don't believe we do. But that's an entirely. What?
Bundy.
Yeah,
Bundy's played at 8.
Bundy's not the same height as McCluskey, but listen, that's a different conversation. This is what Rassie Erasmus and Ireland's obsession with South Africa does to us. So we'll move off that and move outside the pool. You both have Ireland getting through. I do as well, even though I hate putting any predictions out there for fear that I'm the curse. So Pádraig, should Ireland get out, it looks like it'll be France, New Zealand. The rugby world would celebrate if Italy got out of that pool, but it is about just slightly more than 0 chance that they do. It's very unlikely. So with that top half of the tree, looking at it of Pool A and Pool B, can Ireland march their way to the final, or is it almost too soon to say?
They will win the World Cup. I'm sorry. I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. Like I'm more confident about this World Cup than 2 World Cups ago. I don't think anyone was confident last World Cup, but I'm just confident about this group of players. I think you have a block of 3 matches. Chapter, close the door. Then you have 1 game and then a block of 3. Then you have technically a block of 4 games. You just win the next one, and you just win the next one. And we're a team who, at the moment, know how to do one thing very well, and that's win the next one. And that's all we have to keep doing for those 4 games when we get out, once from Scotland on. And I think we can win the World Cup. I just don't see any point in sitting here going, oh, I don't know. And be like the Kerry lad going, now, who knows what's going to happen here? Like, of course we should be confident we're going to win the World Cup. Like, we should. We've won 13 on the bounce. 13 on the bounce. Even if we went to Bayonne and tried to go 13 and Bayonne and create the ultimate curse on that run. But no, like, we should be confident. We should believe in this team now at this stage, and we should believe that the game plan is going to work, because it's been working so far. I think there's a few kinks. I think that was being worked out. I think Samoa showed us something that we need to worry about, which I think, knowing that group, they're going to solve in a heartbeat. And our attack isn't at full strength yet. It's still coming together. And for once, I actually believe the saying we're holding stuff in reserve for the World Cup. I think we're going to see some mental stuff from every country, but definitely from our attack.
Okay. There. I may need to reconsider how often we have you on this podcast, because we can't have this being the issue. Jeff,
unbridled optimism.
Well, you may not want to pass over to me then, Kaelan. You may not want to know my answer.
Jesus, I just want someone to sit in the fence and to not be filling me with any more anguish than I already have, because I have 2 predictions for the World Cup, and one of them I do not want to say out loud. So, Jeff, which way do you see it going? And I assume we know what way you're going to say.
Yeah, I mean, on our pod, we had a superstition during the Six Nations where it was a joke, where we weren't allowed to say the phrase Grand Slam until Ireland, was done and dusted. But I think, I can hardly use the word belief a gajillion times without answering a question like this by saying, I believe the same as Pádraig, Ireland all the way. Obviously we're not saying it's going to happen. There's a lot of variables. There's many strong contenders, France, South Africa, New Zealand. But as Irish fans, we can't forget, there is literally nothing else Andy Farrell could have done with this squad to earn our faith. There's nothing more he could have done to earn our faith. And look at our record, look at our ranking, look at our trophy cabinet. We can definitely do it. There's a few injuries along the way. There's going to be adversity. There's going to be all that going on. But I think we are holding back. We have different ways of playing. And when we go through these other options as well, you had, even without Johnny Sexton, you had situations where we had, Crowley and Ross Byrne, either side of a ruck. You don't know which way the ball is going to go. You don't know who's going to be first receiver. There's all these different options that we have throughout the squad. So we're ready in every sense of that word as it is. So I've no problem going on the record saying that we will. So it's Ireland for me. Sorry, man.
Like, the biggest threat to the World Cup to any team that's not France are the French TV directors, to be honest with you.
But I can get by as a Munster fan who has been burned by that more than anyone else. It feels like I can get behind that, or maybe the fact that there are other good teams in the competition. But that's too rational considering the rabbit hole we've gone down here. Personally, I will say, I think the only thing that'll stop Ireland is things that they can't account for, which is Dupont showing up on the day, or South Africa just clicking, which we know they can do. Even though in a recent podcast, we've had lads say South Africa's consistency, no one's talking about it, but they've been an inconsistent team for 4 years. They've followed up 2 big wins with a poor loss. So they could click. And New Zealand always have it in them in a World Cup that they could do it. Or there could be a heap of injuries that are just insurmountable. But I think that's the only way that Ireland do get stopped on the route. And I did have a bold prediction coming into I suppose, was it the Summer Nation Series, I think it's called now, saying that one of Argentina, England, Wales, Australia would get to the final because they pull off a shock in the semi-final. Having watched them, I'm a lot less confident of that, because they've been so far behind. It's just remarkable. It's like watching the difference in standard between, say, a top URC team and a Premiership team or whatever. That's what we're talking about here. And I suppose I am confident. I just have my own ways of doing things,
Yeah.
which
I know. No,
it
I mean,
worked for the URC final, I should say.
all joking aside, I mean, I think it's not so much that we, it's an assumption that we're going to win, but I think that as the Irish rugby program, as it's evolved through the years, we're no longer in this case of like, oh, plucky Ireland punching above their weight and hoping to maybe get an upset and get to the top table. And we are standing squarely alongside these. There's France, there's New Zealand, there's South Africa, all contenders. We're with them, and they're looking at us just as the same as they're looking at each other as contenders. And I don't know where else you'd want to be going into a tournament like this if you feel you're going to have a chance of winning it. And that's what's made. We started this pod by talking about the buzz, and I think that's what's creating the buzz. It's just how confident we can feel and how much we, dare I say, believe in this team.
Like we're number one in the world for a reason, and I don't think we should shy away from that or then suddenly go, well, look, and like, no, like we beat the teams to get there. We've talked about, we've won a series in New Zealand. We've recently beat South Africa. We've just won a Grand Slam. We're playing some of the best rugby Ireland have ever played. And we're going into a tournament that is, yes, it's stacked against us in some ways. Like, it'd be great if at least one of New Zealand, France, or South Africa were on the other side of the draw, but they're not. That's life. There's nothing we can really do about that. But there's no reason to be afraid of those teams. We have the ability to beat them on our day. And the thing is, we'll be having our day a lot more recently than not. And that's where we think we should take the strength of belief to think we can win the World Cup. And that's why I think we will.
No, that's fair. And I should add that I'm more confident. I'm the most confident I've been going into a World Cup bar 2015, where I thought it was there. It was there for Ireland. And to be fair, it probably was. If they stayed injury free, it was probably, it would have been a toss for coin between themselves and Australia, you'd have imagined, on that day. And listen, we just wait and see. Now, to be fair, we were number one in 2019, but that's just because rankings have their loopholes, and we fell into number one just because we bet Wales, despite being a half strength for one of those games. But anyways, we're going to talk predictions. Now, you've kind of put your head up there and said we're going for Ireland, so I don't really know what to do here. I suppose I'll just go with the tournament as a whole. You see Ireland doing it, but how do you see the knockout stages planning out? We'll just focus on Ireland's side of the draw, because it looks like whoever comes out of those two quarterfinals will get to the final. That's what the consensus is. So, Pádraig, starting with yourself, how do you see the top half of that draw playing out?
I think we're going to see France in the quarterfinals. I think with their injuries this soon to the beginning of the tournament, New Zealand might just skip by them. And I think that's going to be a very good game to watch for a quarterfinal. Who will we possibly face in the semi-final is someone I think we should be beating. And I think we'll face the winner of New Zealand versus South Africa in the final, to be honest, or whoever comes out of the group with us. I think that's who we're going to face in the final. We're going to do it the hard way. It's going to be great.
To say that Ireland are going to win the World Cup and, completely off your own bat is one thing. To say we're going to beat France in the quarterfinal is an entirely new ballpark that I'm definitely not comfortable anymore. But
we'll have to beat France at some point to win this World Cup.
Them. Yeah.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Like South Africa won a World Cup last time by not beating New Zealand. Typically, if you don't play New Zealand, you have a better chance of winning the World Cup. Like there's that too. But I suppose we have to play one of them unless Italy do us a huge solid.
It's more likely be both, given how they'll end up on the other side of the draw for the semis. So like it's just one of the things. I don't see anyone apart from a shock Argentina on the other side of the draw beating one of New Zealand, France, South Africa, or Ireland in potential semifinals.
Well, and of course, in history, Argentina has always been a shock Argentina. But for as far as Ireland's concerned, but I mean, I think even now, it's I mean, I can't really argue with the way Pádraig laid it out there. It's just that's. I think Ireland. This first game between France and New Zealand. I remember going back to the last World Cup. I remember New Zealand played South Africa. Was it the first game? Was it their first round match?
Yeah,
It was the same kind of
round,
thing.
yeah.
And that was kind of a free hit. I mean, New Zealand won that game, but who won the World Cup? You know, that kind of way. It's this first game, France New Zealand. It will sort out who finishes first and second on that side on that pool. But like you say, we're gonna have to play one, if not both of them, eventually. So it's for me, it's just it doesn't you can't really hope what's going to happen and who your opponent is going to be. This is a team that's focused on who they play each time in the day, and they've beaten all these other teams to get where they are. This isn't kind of a fluky ranking with a lucky tour here and there. They've won the matches to not only get that berth but keep it. So it's a different situation for Ireland. So I mean, you just have to be confident, you know.
I'm definitely confident. I should say that in case anyone can't see my facial expressions because they're listening to the podcast as opposed to on YouTube. I am confident. I am just scared of putting that confidence out there to the world. And you know, there is that side of things. I should add, I actually don't see New Zealand going all the way. I know Pádraig mentioned it. I didn't get the chance to jump in. I think it's between France, South Africa, and Ireland at the moment. I think it's a 3-horse race with New Zealand a bit behind. But I could be proven very wrong because I also said I don't buy the South African hype. They won't win the World Cup around this time 4 years ago. So maybe just don't listen to me. Do. I have a full World Cup.
That's not a good thing to say on your podcast.
No, it's really not. But like, you have my head fried with all this. This talk. But lads, we will leave it there. So we are into World Cup week, and like we're into the swing of things now. So the excitement is through the roof, and I hope the same goes for everyone listening. So thanks very much for coming on today and for being so brazen in your predictions, I suppose. There's no other way of putting it. For those at home, this is just the beginning in some regards. I've a written piece looking ahead to the tournament as a whole, as well as looking ahead to Ireland. There'll be preview and recap of the Romania game in Ireland's opening game, as well as a weekly round review pod coming in early next week. So around Monday after the first round, or maybe Tuesday. So again, thanks very much to the lads for joining. I'm sure we'll have them on at some stage during the World Cup. And thanks to everyone at home for listening. So if you like what you see or hear, please do subscribe. You'll find the links for my channels, my Twitter pages, the lads' Twitter pages, and the lads' podcast down below. And as always, I do highly recommend them. Pádraig for all things Connacht in Ireland, Jeff for all things Leinster and Ireland. But for now, folks, please take it easy and enjoy the Rugby World Cup.